When it comes to creating community, whether it's at work, socially, spiritually, some kind of cultural group, or even a meditation retreat center, I'd like to talk about these three postures or masks or energies, and they conform to Aum. They conform to the first three of the 4 seasons and the first 3 or 4 stages in the I Ching. Spring, that is the cheerleader perspective. That's when you're just rooting someone on. They're not looking for advice. They don't feel the need to vent or complain. They just are being empowered by you. That's the energy. And the shadow of that is what's called the love mask, or the helpless and devoted mask. That's where you create connection and bonds by asking for help, by needing to be buoyed up. And that can be a codependent relationship, half of the codependent relationship. So that's spring. And then summer. Summer. So the summer is that trial, right? So we started with the call, and we went, this is from Jung, the call, and then we go to the trial. And that's where a person may need to vent. Now, vent or ventilate, right, is to push out the air so that there can be a flow of something fresher. And so you're just holding space for them. And this can be associated with the serenity mask. The serenity mask, the shadow of that, is where you're pretending everything is fine when it's not. So in this case, we're not talking about the shadow of it. We're talking about you're just holding a space for someone else or yourself during the venting, saying it's like an ideal parent figure or positive nurturing parent figure in your mind. It's just like, yeah, you feel this way and I understand it. And then you can sort of work in spiritual linguistic programming, or a version of neuro-linguistic programming which is not about materialism, where you're saying, okay, I can see more here, and I get into that in the book. Anyway, so then that's Aum, right? So the M is the 3rd season, fall, and that's, in Jungian terms, that's the return. And that's where the person may be actually asking you for advice. I feel like I advise you not to give advice unless someone is asking you for it, right? We don't want to get in other people's business, and I just made that mistake this morning. And it's tricky because you feel like, oh, if they just followed my advice, they could be better, or they're going through the same thing as me and I've seen a little bit more. But honestly, I think that creates the power mask. That's the shadow of it. And if it's unsolicited advice, or even if it's solicited advice, the shadow is the power mask. And you could relate all of this to the Trimurti in Hinduism. So Vishnu, the belly, abundance. Brahma, the heart, that's the desire, but it could also be the anger. And then which is when it all comes to an end, with Shiva. And that's where the return is, or the judgment can happen. And so advice, if it's asked for, you're going to be careful even then. You just don't want to be in other people's business. Anyway, the important thing, the most important in my view, is the 4th season, the winter. That is the bardo in Jungian terms. And it's where there's loss of boundaries and direction. We can appreciate it during meditation, or even the space between words, the space between thoughts. And the more we can cultivate that, the more we can lower our thoughts per minute, or TPM, then the less likely I think we're to go into the shadows at Aum. We're less likely to need a cheerleader from someone else, more likely to be our own cheerleader. The less likely we're going to need to vent, or we can vent to ourselves in a productive way using spiritual linguistic programming or other methodologies like Byron Katie or something like that. And then the if you're comfortable without boundaries and direction, the negative of that is, of course, you're going to try to give people advice when they don't need it or they're not asking for it. But the positive is that you don't need to give advice to others. You need to control them, to fix them. But also, it's a spontaneous, higher consciousness transmission of advice from you to you, from greater self to mortal self.